Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Welcome. Afghan authorities announced that U.S. forces were able to arrest what they called the leaders of terrorists in the border area with Pakistan. However, the Afghani president's spokesman did not confirm whether the U.S. forces were able to actually arrest Ayman al-Zawahiri. He said that his arrest would be an important step in the war on terror. 2 soldiers were killed and others were wounded in clashes with armed paramilitary troops and a group of Afghan extremists who were surrounded in the area of Erzogan, south of Kabul, in order to try to find Ayman al-Zawahiri. U.S. forces believe that the activists are defending al-Zawahiri, who is hiding in the region, and that his arrest will come shortly. The European Interior Ministers agreed to create one unit to share intelligence information between members within the European Union. This agreement came during an emergency meeting which the ministers held in Brussels to discuss the attacks that targeted the capital of Spain, Madrid. The states agreed to strengthen security on trains to prevent a repeat of the Madrid blasts. An Israeli was killed by gunfire this evening in East Jerusalem. The Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades claimed responsibility for the attack. Meanwhile, Israeli occupation forces, supported by more than 10 tanks in the area of Mugraka, south of Gaza City, carried out incursions under cover of intense fire on houses in the area. The tanks entered with the support of military helicopters and forced some residents to leave their homes at gunpoint during the morning hours. An official source from the Jordanian kingdom said that King Abdullah II met yesterday with Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. Israeli broadcasters announced that Sharon held a surprise meeting with the King of Jordan to discuss the unilateral steps to withdraw from the Gaza Strip. They also discussed the route of the separating wall in the West Bank. قررت ألمانيا إرسال 600 جندي آخرين إلى كوسوفو للانضمام إلى قوة. Germany has decided to deploy 600 soldiers to Kosovo to support the international NATO force. The decision was announced by the German defense minister while attending an opening ceremony of a new security academy in Berlin. Stroek said that the soldiers will leave tomorrow. Meanwhile, Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder said that what is happening in Kosovo clarifies the importance of protecting stability in the region. In further developments, KFOR forces began to deploy in the region after hearing the sounds of 2 explosives this afternoon. The Secretary General of the Kurdish Yakti Party in Syria, Abdelbaki Yusuf, called for an investigation of the group of Syrian officials involved in the Kamishli events, while accusing the Minister of Interior of manipulating the story of the events related to the clashes in which Syrian forces killed nearly 30 Kurds. Yusuf also called for freeing the group of Kurds who were arrested. The Taiwanese president Chen Shui-bian left the hospital after escaping an attempted assassination today, returning to the capital of Taipei, where he will cast his vote for the presidential elections scheduled for tomorrow. A guarded motorcade was witnessed leaving the hospital, heading for the airport. The Taiwanese authorities confirmed that the president's life is not in danger, and the presidential elections will take place on time. On the first anniversary of the war with Iraq, significant developments are still taking place, particularly on the security level. In addition, there are no indications that the security situation will stop deteriorating. For the past 12 months, the Iraqi people have been victims of political plans, beginning with the toppling of Saddam Hussein's regime, but not ending with his capture. Yeah!
مع حلول الذكرى السنوية الأولى لبدء الحرب على العراق لم تهدأ نار.
On the first anniversary of the war in Iraq, the flames that were ignited a year ago are still burning. American missiles were launched in southern Iraq last year, marking the start of war. On that day, the Iraqi people, as well as the entire world, were certain that Iraq was at a serious transformation point.
بدء الحرب كما تقول قوات التحالف كان لسببين رئيسيين.
According to the coalition forces, war was waged for two reasons. First, that Iraq posed a threat to neighboring countries because it possessed weapons of mass destruction. The second reason was to liberate the Iraqi people from Saddam Hussein's rule.
وقد شكل التاسع من إبريل من العام الماضي.
April 9th of last year was a turning point in Iraq's history. The capital, Baghdad, collapsed, and Saddam Hussein's regime was removed from power. However, the Iraqi president and his aides disappeared. The coalition forces immediately published a wanted list containing 55 names of the most prominent figures of the former regime. The coalition forces took control of Iraq. However, this did not end the military operations. The coalition forces are unable to put a stop to the daily attacks against them, where a number of their soldiers were either killed or wounded. The capture of the former Iraqi president, Saddam Hussein, and his supporters from the Ba'ath Party was not enough to stop these attacks from occurring. Nevertheless, the coalition forces added the capture of Saddam Hussein to its list of successes of this war, especially after the killing of Saddam's two sons, Uday and Qusay. Currently, outside forces are being blamed for the security deterioration in Iraq. The operations are taking a different twist. They are not limited to the U.S. forces, but attacks are now being waged against the Iraqis themselves, such as the attack near the Jordanian embassy and the attack on the UN building. Further attacks have been waged on mosques and religious sites. Up to now, the Iraqis are the victims of what is happening around them. Thousands of innocent civilians paid their lives as a price for these changes, and security now is a rare commodity in Iraq.
On the anniversary of the war in Iraq, Americans demonstrated on the streets of Los Angeles protesting the war waged by their country. In front of the U.S. federal building, peace organizations displayed hundreds of shoes that belonged to the U.S. soldiers killed in Iraq. The organizers say that the shoes represent the number of soldiers who have been killed since the beginning of the war with Iraq. The Americans are not the only ones demonstrating, but other regions in the world witnessed similar protests. About 50 people in the Philippines demonstrated near the U.S. Embassy in Manila, demanding that the U.S. forces immediately withdraw from Iraq, and accusing President Bush of seeking to control Iraqi oil.
A day before the first anniversary of the US-led invasion of Iraq, US Secretary of State Colin Powell arrived in Baghdad against a backdrop of ongoing bloodshed and insecurity. US President George W. Bush continued to defend his decision to launch the war, while some US allies are considering to withdraw their troops from the country and others canceled plans to deploy soldiers there due to the deteriorating situation.
On the eve of the first anniversary of the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq, U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell arrived in Baghdad Friday to meet with U.S. and Iraqi officials. Citing security reasons, U.S. State Department refused to discuss even the basics of Powell's planned journey. In the meantime, U.S. President George W. Bush is still sending messages of threats to both Syria and Iran while defending his decision to go to war against Iraq, saying it has resulted what he sees as a democracy rising in the Middle East.
Today, Iraq has a new interim law that guarantees basic rights for all. Freedom of religion, the right to cast a secret ballot, and equality under the law. And these historic changes are sending a message across the region from Damascus to Tehran. Freedom is the future of every nation.
For over a year, Bush has been on the defensive over the war against Iraq. His stocks were already falling in nations opposing the war, but now his stocks are also falling in nations from within his own coalition. Polish President Aleksander Kwasniewski announced that his country could not verify information about Iraq's suspected weapons of mass destruction, which have not been found yet, and which were the main reason behind Bush's decision to go to war.
Of course, I feel a certain discomfort that we were misled about weapons of mass destruction.
The Polish president's remarks signal Poland's growing disturbance at being involved in Iraq after Spain's incoming socialist government pledged to pull its troops out of the country. Spain's Prime Minister-elect José Luis Rodríguez Zapatero insisted that he would withdraw Spain's 1,300 troops from Iraq despite U.S. appeals to reconsider. Another U.S. ally, South Korea, said Friday it had cancelled plans to send troops to Kirkuk due to the deteriorating situation blamed on the U.S. occupation. A South Korean defense official said that Seoul's government agreed last month to dispatch more than 3,000 troops to northern Iraq in phases starting from next month. Because of the change of plan, the dispatch is likely to be put off to no earlier than late June. The decision to review the South Korean deployment came after Washington asked Seoul to allow U.S. combat troops to remain in the Kirkuk area, a position South Korea was unable to accept. South Korea said this proposal runs against the principles of the troop dispatch approved by the South Korean parliament, which stipulate that South Korean troops will maintain their own independent command and control system in a defined area which they control for non-military purposes.
On the ground, U.S. occupation forces killed 2 reporters for the Dubai-based Al Arabiya satellite television channel and opened fire on the car carrying Al Manar channel's reporter in Baghdad, Ahmed Al-Askari. This report has more.
Once again, U.S. occupation forces killed journalists in occupied Iraq, and this time 2 reporters of the Arab satellite channel Al Arabiya were the targets. Cameraman Ali Abdulaziz and correspondent Ali Al-Khatib from the Dubai-based channel were killed by U.S. fire in Baghdad Thursday night. The cameraman's brother Haidar was surprised because he was present when Ali asked the U.S. forces if he can film the Burj Al Hayat hotel that was earlier targeted with rockets. Haidar added that U.S. soldiers gave his brother permission to film, but moments later a car traversed a checkpoint and soldiers opened fire randomly. My brother and his colleague wanted to leave, continued Haidar, and while they were about to leave, the soldiers opened fire on them.
We drove on the pavement after they fired our vehicle, but they shot at us. They knew we were journalists. We have already spoken to them before.
A U.S. Army spokesman confirmed U.S. troops killed an Iraqi while trying to run a checkpoint, but he was unable to give the gender of the victim, nor say whether the person had been from the media. Al Manar channel's correspondent Ahmed Al-Askari was also targeted by U.S. bullets that riddled his car. Al-Askari was reporting the massive deployment of U.S. tanks and armored vehicles in Baghdad on the eve of the invasion's first anniversary. Al-Askari said that the scene shocked Baghdad's residents who feared the situation might blow up at any moment. The reporters' deaths would be the second and third of journalists at the hands of the U.S. military since May 1st, when U.S. President George W. Bush declared major combat over. On August 18th, the U.S. Army shot dead Reuters news agency cameraman Dana Mazen as he filmed outside Baghdad's Abu Ghraib prison. During last spring's invasion, a Reuters and Spanish cameraman were both killed when a U.S. tank fired on Baghdad's Palestine Hotel on April 8th. The Pentagon cleared the soldiers, saying the troops thought they spotted a weapon from a window of the hotel, although it was the home of Western media during the war. Also, a journalist from Arab satellite channel Al Jazeera was also killed in a U.S. air raid on Baghdad. And with the last deaths, the U.S.-led war against Iraq has now claimed the lives of some 16 journalists.
Now moving to the Palestinian territories, Israeli occupation troops raided a Gaza village on Friday as part of an ongoing aggression against the Palestinians. Palestinian residents said about 25 Israeli army vehicles, including tanks, armored personnel carriers and bulldozers, moved into Mughrata village. 7 Palestinians and 2 Israeli occupation soldiers were wounded in the fighting. Apache helicopters firing machine guns flew overhead. President said the army blew up the house of Maisra Hassan, a Hamas field commander. Bulldozers also destroyed 4 houses and ripped up the main road, damaging water pipes and cutting off electricity. Israel has been stepping up raids in Gaza ahead of a possible withdrawal from the area. A spokesman of Al-Qaeda group said that Osama Bin Laden and his number 2 deputy, Ayman al-Zawahiri, are safe in Afghanistan and not in Pakistan, where troops are launching an operation. This came after initial Pakistani reports said that al-Zawahiri is surrounded near the Afghan border. Meanwhile, an Afghan government spokesman said US and Afghan troops have captured, quote, semi-senior terrorist leaders along the border with Pakistan. He said that while he could not confirm that al-Zawahiri had been arrested, his capture would be an extremely important step in the so-called war on terror.
Reports that Al-Qaeda number 2 Ayman al-Zawahiri and Osama Bin Laden's right-hand man is surrounded by Pakistani troops are not confirmed. Pakistan have been launching a massive operation to crack down on Taliban and Al-Qaeda fighters on the border with Afghanistan since Tuesday. President Pervez Musharraf told CNN that government forces might have a high-value Al-Qaeda target surrounded near the Afghan border, but soon the report was denied.
President Musharraf, while giving an interview to one of the Western TV channel this evening, he said that there could be some high-value target, but we cannot say who that high-value target may be. What you are talking about, Ayman al-Zawahiri, I think this is just speculation in the media. No one from Pakistan government has yet confirmed about his arrest or about his presence.
The news spread when on Thursday Pakistani forces launched a fresh offensive against suspected Al-Qaeda fighters and their Pakistani tribesmen allies near the Afghan border. Fighting went on through the day and the sound of shelling in the south Waziristan region could be heard late into the evening. The search by Pakistani troops was intensified on the border on Friday, so was the fierce resistance. A military spokesman said the fierce resistance that the fighters have put up shows that they are determined to fight until the end and that they are protecting an Al-Qaeda leader with the strong possibility it was Zawahiri. The frenzied speculation was triggered by the sighting of a foreigner being whisked away at high speed in a bulletproof vehicle Tuesday when paramilitaries went searching for tribesmen wanted for sheltering fugitives. But Abdul Samad, an Al-Qaeda spokesman, said both Osama Bin Laden and Zawahiri are safe and in Afghanistan, not in neighboring Pakistan, where a massive manhunt is taking place. He said the reports are just propaganda by the United States and the Pakistani army to weaken the morale of the Taliban. The Bush administration was being cautious about the news that Pakistani forces were fighting their way towards al-Zawahiri.
The Pakistani government is very serious about catching the terrorists that are on its territory, and they're now working in territory that's very wild, very difficult territory with substantial military forces, and I guess we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully they will get somebody important.
The U.S. House of Representatives Thursday doubled the reward for Bin Laden's capture to $50 million. A $25 million reward remains on the head of Zawahiri, considered the brains of Al-Qaeda and the key planner of the September 11th attacks on the United States. U.S. forces increased their activities on the border in eastern Afghan Khost province, about 50 kilometers west of the Pakistani border with North Waziristan, as part of a new campaign dubbed Operation Mountain Storm to trap Al-Qaeda and Taliban leaders on March the 7th.
Meanwhile, the hunt for Osama Bin Laden has also intensified across the border in Afghanistan. And according to a U.S. general, the much derided Afghan National Army is playing a significant role in the operation.
Efforts to recreate a professional army to replace unruly militia forces loyal to regional warlords have been dogged by high desertion rates among undermotivated recruits complaining of low pay and tough conditions. But Major General Craig Weston said such problems were now a thing of the past. Weston said Afghan National Army ANA troops had been deployed since last year in combat alongside the 13,500-strong US-led force in Afghanistan and were currently involved in a big new drive against Al-Qaeda leaders, including Bin Laden, codenamed Mountain Storm. Weston said they had already proven an asset in such hunts.
These troops can tell you by looking at a crowd of people who is an Arab, who comes from another country, things that we in the coalition have a difficult time picking out. When they go into a village, people will respond to them and answer questions that they have that they may not respond to the coalition. Plus they, in many cases, know the terrain, so they are a powerful force multiplier when we take them out into the field with us.
The 15th and last battalion of the ANA Central Corps graduated Thursday, and Weston said this would be a major milestone, with the next task to establish 2 brigades of 3,000 each in the southern south of Kandahar and Qardez. Weston said the aim was to build the force to its projected size of 70,000 as soon as possible, but stressed this could be done only as quickly as funding and equipment could be secured. Some Afghan officials have expressed concern that Washington might look at the build-up of a national army as an opportunity to scale back its troop presence in Afghanistan. Weston said recruiting figures were way up, and a Central Corps would reach its full strength of 10,000 by June, and the ANA's combat strength would be 20,000 by next winter. Abdullah Al-Gimzi, Dubai Television.
Syria says 30 people have died in a Kurdish uprising. Interior Minister Ali Haj Hamoud, speaking at a media conference yesterday, said the clashes which erupted a week ago between Kurds and authorities in northeastern Syria were unprecedented.
Syria's Interior Minister announcing the first official death toll from the clashes said 30 people, including policemen, died in violence over the last week. He defended the actions of the authorities, saying when the police peacefully intervened to end the rioting, they were faced by rioters who opened fire and increased aggression. The security forces had no choice but to be firm and calm the situation. Hamoud said the rioters damaged the infrastructure to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, and said lawbreakers who were arrested would soon be put on trial. Kurds make up about 2 million of Syria's 17 million people, the majority of whom are Arabs. They have often said they want more rights for themselves as well as citizenship for about 200,000 stateless Kurds who are now living in Syria. Hamoud said the situation was now under control and said that attempts to depict the violence as ethnic clashes would fail. Following the arrest of the rioters, investigations are underway to determine whether there were any internal or external interferences. In the northern cities of Aleppo and Afrin, Kurds buried 5 people on Wednesday and said they had been shot dead by police as they demonstrated to mark Saddam Hussein's chemical weapons attack on Kurds in Iraq in 1988. Tensions were running high again in Afrin on Thursday after a group of Kurdish radicals set fire to a Syrian flag. The Vice President, Abdul Halim Khaddam, said the riots would not breach Syria's unity and accused unspecified foreigners of trying to benefit from these incidents. Susan Fikri, Dubai Television.
More than 1,000 extra NATO troops have arrived in Kosovo after a second day of violence between ethnic Albanians and Serbs. At least 22 people have been killed and hundreds more wounded since the violence erupted on Wednesday. Former U.S. envoy to the Balkans, Richard Holbrooke, blamed the violence on a failure of Western leadership.
Taking no chances, NATO bolstered its peacekeeping force in Kosovo with 1,100 more troops on Thursday after a second day of violence there. Amid tight security, reinforcements from Britain, Italy and the United States arrived in the UN-run province to quell tensions and ease the threat of renewed conflict in the volatile Balkans. It is Kosovo's worst crisis since the province's war ended in 1999. It all started on Wednesday when ethnic Albanians blamed Serbs for the drownings of 2 children and began rampaging in revenge. The ensuing violence reignited tensions in the UN-run province, with clashes that killed at least 22 people and wounded hundreds more, including several dozen UN police and NATO peacekeepers. On Thursday, ethnic Albanians evaded tear gas and rubber bullets fired by French NATO peacekeepers to torch an Orthodox church in the ethnically divided city of Kosovka Mitrovica, where the clashes began. Mobs across Serbia also set mosques and houses on fire and threatened Kosovo's ethnic Albanians with slaughter and death. Outside Pristina, KFOR troops blocked the road to the Serb village of Kosovo Polje and fired tear gas at a crowd of 100 Albanians attempting to break through. In North Mitrovica, French military vehicles blocked a bridge to prevent Albanians crossing to the Serbian side. The violence underscored the persisting bitter divisions between Kosovo's mostly Muslim ethnic Albanians who want independence from Serbia and Orthodox Christian Serbs, a minority in Kosovo who consider the province their ancient homeland. The international community reacted with concern on Thursday. The United Nations appealed for an end to the violence. And former US envoy to the Balkans, Richard Holbrooke, did not mince his words and blamed it squarely on the United States, the United Nations and the European Union.
The events in Kosovo yesterday were inevitable. In fact, when I was there in October, I publicly warned people, including the United States and the United Nations personnel, that if they didn't take steps to resolve the final status question of Kosovo, that it was inevitable that there would be a deterioration. I regret to say that the Bush administration did not agree with this assessment and, on the contrary, took exactly the opposite view. In any case, what you've seen in Kosovo in the last few hours is the inevitable byproduct of failure of leadership by the United States and the United Nations to implement a negotiation to resolve the final status of Kosovo.
The Balkans conflict nightmare is back again, it seems. The international community has to lose no time and go quick back to the drawing board if lives have to be spared. Jamal Ali, Dubai Television.
An official source at the royal court has said that His Majesty King Abdullah made a brief working visit to Israel yesterday, where he held talks with the Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. The source also said that His Majesty's visit was part of Jordan's keenness to dissuade Israel from taking any unilateral moves that might lead to adverse effects on the Palestinian rights and their future to establish an independent state, as well as the deportation from their lands. During his meeting with Sharon, King Abdullah stressed that the roadmap peace plan was the only way to guarantee the rights of all parties and to achieve a just and comprehensive peace in the region. The source pointed out that Jordan, and in light of its contacts with Egypt during the past few days about Sharon's withdrawal plan from Gaza, has made extensive contacts with all world powers, including the United States, Europe and Russia, to urge Israel to commit to its road peace map obligations. During those contacts, King Abdullah has affirmed that any Israeli withdrawal from Gaza should be a prelude to complete withdrawal from all Palestinian lands and not a mere tactic move that aims at evacuating Gaza's settlements and transferring settlers to the West Bank. The source also added that King Abdullah has demanded the Israeli government to release the rest of Jordanian detainees at Israeli jails as soon as possible. The royal court source concluded that Jordan fully realizes Palestinians' daily plights and is keen to exploit all means to put a halt on the de facto policy and to find a just and comprehensive solution to the Palestinian question. European Union ministers gathered in Brussels for an emergency summit on tackling terrorism after the Madrid train bombings and were set to back appointing a European counter-terrorism coordinator. One major focus was on implementing steps such as a common European arrest warrant and joint investigation teams agreed after the September 11 attacks on the United States, but which some member states have yet to put into effect. EU ambassadors agreed in principle yesterday to a proposal by EU Foreign Policy Chief Javier Solana to appoint a European security coordinator likely to be a civil servant answerable to member governments. Belgium renewed its plea for a European center to share and analyze data on terrorism, but other ministers brushed it aside as unnecessary, saying what mattered was making national intelligence agencies cooperate in practice.
Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities. And the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.